Gute Woche. Chanukah. I'd like to dedicate the course of this learning tonight should be L'Tova Sachenu B'nei Yisrael, who are in Gaza, whether they are the hostages, whether they are the chayalim, and that every one of them should come home safely, successfully and safely, and refuah shlema for all the wounded. So should have a refuah shlema. I'm going to start off today with a letter of the Rebbe, which just became public knowledge. It's unsigned. It was found in the archives of Reb Meir Harlik Olav Shalom. So we don't know who it was written to, or I don't know. The name is it's been deleted. It's from 21st of Marcheshvan Tovshin Chof. And the question, the Rebbe is responding to the question that why is it that women are not bound to say Hallel on Chanukah? Now the Gemara says, actually we just learned this in Gemara, in Besomim, they have the expression Avhein Hoyu B'Oise Hanes. They were also part of the miracle. And therefore, that's why women have got a duty if there's no man home. So then a woman would also have to light the menorah. If so, why should a woman not have a chiyuv to say Hallel? We know that women do daven, etc., but that's more seen as a voluntary thing. But to say it's a chiyuv, a woman should have to a chiyuv to say Hallel, that's not known, and that's what the Rebbe is addressing here. And this person had written to the Rebbe in the name of a particular godel that he paskins that women do have a chiyuv to say Hallel and Chanukah. The Rebbe says, I'm very surprised about this psak, as you yourself also write. See, Puk Chazi Ma Amod Dabar. Now, actually, this phrase is a very common phrase in the Gemara. It can be read Ma Amod Dabar. What is the people on the outside? What are people on the street doing? Or Ma Amod Dabor. Reb Meshach Hatznelberg and Nova Shalom used to insist it's Ma Amod Dabor. It's mostly it works. Occasionally it doesn't, but never mind. What we got to just see what's in Minhag Olam basically. I no mention anywhere that women have a duty to say Hallel during Chanukah, and therefore, although we normally say Lo ro'inu eino rayo, but in a thing which is such a frequent thing, and it's a regular thing, we would say we haven't seen the raya that it's not true. And then the Rebbe continues to say if Satake, because Hallel was instituted within the context of Tefillah. And in other words, it's not a totally standalone like Megillah, which is more of a standalone. Here, the Rebbe brings proofs to this. It says here in Mishnah Rosh Hashanah, Rishon Makris Hallel, talking about this, the Chazan for Shachris, he will be the leader for Hallel, etc. Since women tend to be Yotzer, the mitzvah of davening, by just saying a bakosha, let's say brachas in the morning or something, even those who say that women do have to daven a Shmona Esrei, but that's only bakoshas rachamim, but not the whole tefillah. And therefore, there's no duty to say that, no chiyuv to say that women have to say Hallel as a chiyuv. Not so. I got a message from someone. He asked me, should I tell my wife and daughters to stop saying Hallel? That's not what we're being said here. The question is there a chiyuv to say Hallel? And the Rebbe is saying it's not a chiyuv. Like women do go out of their way absolutely to hear Megillah, and Hallel is lav dafka because it wasn't instituted as a chiyuv, even though afein hoyu b'osanes. Then he goes into Hallel on the nights of Pesach. And even though when we have the minhag Svar, the minhag Arizal, to do Hallel with the bracha the night of Pesach, and women are bound. It's Avhein Hoya Boishanes. We haven't seen that women, let's say, if they're not davening Ma'ariv, does Avka say Hallel or have to say Hallel? Love Davka. Meanwhile, the Rebbe is ma'orer him the importance of limud pnimis haTorah and and he gives a reference to the Hakdama of the Reb Chaim Vital and the importance of learning limud Primus HaTorah. Okay. Whilst I'm mentioning this story, so we had recently a discussion about a business. I had a story about someone who had a stall at a business fair, and he was looking for a way that it could be open on Shabbos, not because he wanted the money, but just because of not to get into trouble with the organizers. So Rebbe Aaron Tieferman told me the following: there was a Yid who lived in London, a Rov, with the name of Rebbe David Friedman. He was a Gehaben Yid. He was a Rov in Bells in 1999 here. Was a Gehaben Yid, and there's several Sforim which he published of anecdotes which he had passed, people, we heard from previous generations. He was a call upon him. He was, for some time, he was a Rov in Melbourne. And during that time, he came to the Rebbe, he came to New York, and he went to the Satmar Rov, he went to the Rebbe, and I've forgotten who the third one was. And he discussed the same question with the Rebbe and with the others. He says, I'm not going to tell you what the others told me. But the question was the following: a Yid owns a laundrette, or several laundrettes. And laundrette is where people come in and you pop in some coins in the machine and do their washing, do their laundry. Is he allowed to leave his laundrettes open on Shabbos? We're working with a shutter, with a goysha partner or something like that. Is there a way to do it? I just want to emphasize that a laundrette is more complicated than a vending machine. Already before the war, in the Shuvas Reb Shimon Greenfeld, the Marshag, he was a Rav in Sambotelli, and he talks about vending machines, and he takes it a lenient view, and he says, you've got 30 packets of chocolate. They could have bought the chocolate yesterday, could have bought it tomorrow. They buy it on Shabbos, but it makes no difference for you. It's a sale. Conversely, with the laundry, with the washing machines, it's not a sale; it's a service, and they're using this time. They're paying for the time on Shabbos, so that makes it more complicated. So, all right. So then, Marshag wasn't talking with a partnership. Here we're talking about, could he bring in a partner? So he asked Rebbe David, asked the Rebbe about this, and the Rebbe said, find out whether other Yidden in that area, in Melbourne, whether they also have these laundrettes open on Shabbos with this kind of thing. And even if we can find something on the lines that even though we can find a heter, but there would be an issue of Chilul Hashem, it would be look wrong that there's from a Yid who has a business operating on Shabbos. It could be a question of Chilul Hashem. Generally, this whole thing of using heter mechira is something which more Haredish Rabbanim won't touch. Because the next thing is the children are brought up to know that daddy's business is open on Shabbos. It doesn't bode well for the next generation. Right, let's move on. Okay, so now another Meiser. Now it's the third Meiser of tonight in Motzei Shabbos, yeah? So if you remember, a couple of years ago, I think, I had the following story, that there was a shliach in Germany who had contacted me that there's a Russian Jewish couple who had a boy, both Jewish, the baby is Jewish, and they refused to do a bris. Eventually, after 5 years, they decided they're going to do a circumcision in a hospital. They're going to have a goyish doctor to do it, a surgeon. They asked the shliach, the Rov, to be there and to kind of give it some religious value. And so here was the question: it's going to be a Goyshe practitioner, and is there any value? Is he giving a hechsher on something which is not acceptable? So at the time, I said he should go, thinking that first of all that possibly he could persuade the surgeon to allow him to do the chituch, to do the cut, and even if not, there's a concept sometimes in halacha of oimed al gabo, that if a goy does something, and there's a Jew who's oimed al gabo, who's standing and kind of so although the guy doesn't have the appropriate kavanah, intention, but the presence of the Jew will kind of provide that which is missing. Also, you have oimed al gabo with a child doing making tzitzis, whatever it may be. Sometimes we have this concept in halacha that oimed al gabo does make a difference. And therefore, I felt if the shliach, the Rov, will be there, at least you gain that there's Yisrael oimed al gabo. At that time, I put it on the shiur, and I got some backlash from people who are Lomda Shiden. As I said, you're making a kalus, you're making a slight in the dinim of Mila. People know that you have to have a moil. Now you're saying it's okay. The kids, that was what happened then. So now, just this past week, someone sends me this piece, and this is from the diary of someone called Yisrael Sosova, Olav Shalom. If you remember, there was someone, there used to be a bookshop, America's bookstore was across the street from 770, next to the Kerestira mikveh. And so Yisrael Sosova, he was running the shop. Later, he'd sell Sforim in 770. The Kitzer, when he was a boch, evidently, he kept a yomman, he kept a diary, and he writes, this is Rosh Chodesh Tammuz, Tov Shin Chof Vov, 1966. There was an Australian rabbi, he says, there's an Australian Rov who came into the Rebbe and was talking with the Rebbe about various inyonim, and it also came into conversation about Japan. It looks like he would, relatively speaking, Japan is around the corner from a 9-hour flight only from Australia, but Japan had a very, very small Jewish presence, and so the Australian Rabbonim perhaps felt a certain degree of responsibility. So in this context, with the Rov, this Australian Rov asks the Rebbe that there is a Jewish a couple, and she's expecting to give birth shortly. If it's a boy, we'll have to arrange someone to travel there, or he himself, or not, it seems to be saying that he himself would travel to be with the moil. I don't know who this is. Would that be necessary? So the Rebbe says, and this is amazing, the Rebbe says, it's not necessary. The father should get hold of a doctor. The father will be present while the doctor does the bris. So the Rov said, but Reb Chaim Brisk says that you'll have to do hatofas dam bris. It means that later you'll have to have, if a goy does a bris, so then you'll have to have a yid later pricking to extract some blood for the mitzvah of Mila. And the Rebbe said, if oimed al gaboy, if there's a yid oimed standing over looking at what's going on, and he sees that how the bris is being done, then there's no need for hatofas dam bris. And then there was further conversation about Geir. So, first of all, I feel exonerated that the Rebbe had encouraged this. And it's even more because there we had no brera. The parents, no way were they having a moil. Here, the Rov is saying, should I arrange a moil to fly from Australia to Japan? And the Rebbe says, it's okay, you can have the father with the doctor. No, it does not say Roy for Nochri, but that's the obvious shot. Yeah. Right. So, actually, back in that time when this conversation, so someone pointed me to a tshuva of Reb Chaim Oizer. And this tshuva is actually written in the year Tofrei Samach Zayin. That's 120, almost 120 years ago. And it's written to the community in Budapest, in Pest, in relation to an event in Australia, also in Australia. And the story there is a non-Jewish man wanted to marry a Jewish woman. And he was ready to go for Gerus. And there was a rabbiner there, a rabbi, no Bezdin. This is over 100, well over 100 years ago. And it looks like that this prospective Ger had already been circumcised at an earlier stage. And so the rabbiner got a Hatofas Dam Bris done. The Hatofas Dam Bris was done by 2 Goyish doctors. So what does it help if you need to have a Eid? If a Goy does a bris, then you have to have a Eid do Hatofas Dam Bris. What's the point of getting a Goyish doctor to do it? Yeah. At any rate, so actually this whole business, whether a Goy can do a bris or not, so physically he can do the cutting. Does it count? So there's a whole sugya in Avodah Zarah, Gemara Avodah Zarah, is daf Chovov through Chov Zayin. It's like one full page, a half and a half page. And the various Tanoim, Reb Huda, Reb Meir, Reb Yoshi, they are all saying that Mila done by a Goy is kosher. There's no Jew available, they say it's kosher. Later on the Gemara, Rav seems to say that it is not kosher. Okay, so now, meanwhile, discussing how could the bris be kosher when it's done by a goy. So Tosfos on the sugya there asks, why is it if a goy writes a get, it's not kosher? Because we say the goy does it adaita de nafshi. He's writing a get. He's not thinking for whom he's writing. He's just writing to make the money for his job. He's not interested in focusing, dedicating it for whom it's done for. So why then should a bris done by a goy be kosher according to those Tanoim? It seems to be inconsistent. If he writes a get, it's not kosher. Why if he does a bris, it is kosher? And Tosfos says a basic interesting thing, that a Yiddish boy is oimid, is destined to have a bris, and therefore the default position it's done l'shem mitzvah, l'shem milah. A woman is not destined to be divorced, and therefore we don't say, oh, he means l'shem l'shmo. We say adaita de nafsh. So whereas with a gerus, stam goy is not oimid l'hisgayer. So therefore, if a goy would do a bris for another goy, and it won't count for gerus and won't count for hatafas dam bris. That's why he has a problem. But if a goy does a bris for a Jewish child, so then we'll say it is done lishma, not like a get, which is that's the position of Tosfos. But Tosfos, you could say, is still going according to the earlier shita of the Tanoim, whereas in the Gemara says. The Gemara then finishes off that there are Amiroim who say that it's not kosher, and that's how the poskim bring the halacha that if a goy does a bris, it's not kosher. And you have to do hatofas dam bris, but we discussed this a few weeks ago. Then the Reb Chaim Oizer brings another very interesting thing. You have in the Rosh, in the discussion about making parchment. Now, when you make parchment for Sefer Torah, Tefilin, Mezuzah, it has to be made l'shma for the kedusha of these writing shem kedusha. Now the halacha there is that Yisrael oimed al gabov works. So why is it that Yisrael oimed al, if there's a goy who makes parchment and Yisrael oimed al gabov, it is valid, and whereas if a goy writes a get, Yisrael oimed al gabov, it's not valid. So the Rosh says a very interesting thing. When it comes to making the leather, the parchment, it's only necessary to say lishma at the beginning of the process. Once you've said lishma at the beginning of the process, then he can continue doing it, and he doesn't have to think about it. He just focuses on what he's doing. So the Rosh says there's a difference between a minute or a protracted process. A get takes a while to write. And therefore, we're going to say Adaita Denafshika of it. Ibud Sefer Torah, since it's only at the beginning, it has to be Lishmo. And there the Yisrael is Omed al Gabo. That 1 minute, 1 second, whatever, of the beginning, there the guy is able to kind of accept to do Lishmo, and because of Yisrael Omed al Gabo. By the same token, with a bris, since it's a Rega Echod, therefore Omed al Gabo would work. So this is very interesting. So the Reb Chaim Oizer seems to, in the case of Gerus, it doesn't seem to be, Hatofas Dambris is not happy with that. But he does seem to condone, to a degree, that Oimad al-Gabov would work. How does that fit with the Sugya, the way the Gemara Paskins like Rav, that Mila done by a Goy does not work? Possibly that they bring in the Oimad al-Gabov. The earlier, the Tanoim, who said it's kosher, are talking about Yisrael Omed al Gabo. When Rav said it's not kosher, he's talking about whether no Yisrael Omed al Gabo. That's the way you can learn the sugya. I must tell you that I looked around in Meforshim, in the Bach, etc. Meforshim Harambam. I don't see anyone who says that. Actually, I saw in the Meiri to the contrary, where he says it's not kosher even if Yisrael Omed al Gabo. But fine. But here you have a Koponim. The Rebbe seems to be, well, you have here a backing for this idea that Yisrael Omed al Gabo would work if it's a very short, because it's a short thing. Now, I was also curious because this Rov mentioned something of Reb Chaim Brisk, of Brisk. What's his discussion about? So I looked around. What is Reb Chaim Brisk? He talks about this Gemara in Gemara Avodah Zarah. And he asks the question, when the Rambam says if a goy does a bris, it's possible, but then he says there's no point of doing it again. There's no, in other words, according to the Rambam Bapashtis, there's no hatofas dam bris. And Reb Chaim, there's a whole arichas in Reb Chaim about this, and I don't know how much I should go into it here. I'm also not so clear in my mind. There's two opinions in the Gemara at the end why a bris by a goy is not kosher. Is it from Hamoil Yimoil or Himoil Yimoil, the one who is circumcised may circumcise, or is it for Atas Brisi Tishme? Is it because the goy is not part of the covenant, therefore he cannot make the covenant if he's not part of the covenant? So we've got here two approaches. If you're circumcised, you can circumcise. Or if you are part of the covenant, you can perpetuate the covenant. What I understand what Reb Chaim's vort is are we talking about that it's a logic that since you are part, it's a tradition, therefore you have to be part of that to be able to make it, to transfer it to the next generation, so to speak, or is it a separate din that Mila has to be done by a Yid? And therefore he suggests, although if it's got to do with Hamoil Yimoil, perhaps then Hatofas Dam Bris is not the normal procedure, and therefore it doesn't necessarily have to be done by a Yid. Whereas if you say that Mila has to be done by it's a din in Mila, then Hatofas Bris, Dam Bris is part of Mila, has to be done by a Yid. Now, what he's saying is, I'm going to end off with this, it's getting complicated. When a goy does a bris, there is hatofas dam bris. There has been bleeding. So if you say hatofas dam bris, if you say that we're talking here about that the hamoil yimol, that you have to be a bar hochi, you have to be part of this, and therefore you can perhaps for hatofas dam bris that doesn't apply, and that's why the Rambam says if a goy does a bris, then you don't need to hatofas dam bris. That seems to be what Reb Chaim is saying, but possibly this is what this Rov was referring to when he says that Reb Chaim says you have to do hatofas dam bris. Either way, as you can see there, the Rebbe has said to him, that's if a goy does it without the Jewish presence. If the Yid is present, I also want to perhaps qualify. We have here a diary of someone of Yechidus. We don't know how accurate it was. It could be Could be that Rov didn't repeat it properly. It could be that the one who wrote the diary didn't write it accurately. But at least if we do have, at least when he sees such a thing, I think it certainly deserves that we should be able to start, trying to trace and find a background, a backing to what's been said, without paskening. That's okay. Right. Let's move on. And here, someone asked me this past week, can you use ground cloves for Besomim? So I think we discussed this once before, but not mamish this question, but let's go through what's good for Havdolo, etc. And ginger on one side.
You can unmute. Unmute. Unmute.
Hello. Sorry about this disconnection. Any indication? So we're looking at about the ground cinnamon, ground cloves. So there's a difference between the pepper, which is more a flavor than a spice, with more flavor than or fragrance, and therefore you would not make a bracha very many of somim on pepper. With the cloves you would. And then what I'm seeing in contemporary svarim, that there is a svar to say that whole cloves, yes, but if the cloves are ground or made into a powder, then they become more like a food item rather than a flavor, rather than a fragrance, and therefore not to make a bracha on ground cloves. And therefore the answer to this question is better to keep to whole cloves, because there's a svara not to make a bracha very near some on cloves. Let's move on. I think it's now working again. see it. Back again.
Recording in progress.
No shared screen.
Okay. Back again. Baruch Hashem. Okay. All right. So here, about tefillin within about before the Bar Mitzvah. So the custom is mentioned Hayom Yom, that we start putting on tefillin 2 months before the Bar Mitzvah. The basis in Shulchan Aruch, the Alter Rebbe writes about 2 or 3 months before the Bar Mitzvah. So then, just recently, I mean, people often ask this question. They want to start putting on tefillin with the Bar Mitzvah boy a few days earlier. Sometimes they've gone to New York to be by the Ohel, etc. Let's say Yud Shvat or something like that. And it works out a few days earlier would be more convenient. Sometimes it could be other reasons. How rigid is it that 2 months and not a day earlier? Now, I want to mention that the Polish Yidden don't start earlier, and they start mamash on the day of the Bar Mitzvah. The reason being that the worry is that child under Bar Mitzvah doesn't necessarily look after their personal hygiene, etc. And therefore they don't go any earlier at all. But we do follow the minig of 2 months. But the question here is about how rigid. Now, just about 2 weeks ago was published in the back of the Svardus pamphlet a letter to Rebbe Hirschel Schusterman, who was the Rov in Chicago. I met him when I was in Australia 40-something years ago. At any rate, he's the father of Rabbi Yossi Schusterman, who's also the Rov in Beverly Hills. But this is in relation to, I've skipped out the middle part of the letter, but the Rebbe writes to him, I'm surprised that you don't mention anything about the beginning of putting on tefillin of your son over here, which happened yesterday. So what's the background to this conversation? So the oldest Schusterman boy, his name is Shmaryahu, and Mrs. Schusterman is a sister of Rabbi Yudel Krinsky. So this boy Shmaryahu Schusterman, he goes to New York and he's learning in Bedford and Dean. He turns Bar Mitzvah Chof Gimel Shvat, and consequently he should start putting on tefillin 2 months earlier, Chof Gimel Kislev. But the young lad decided that he's going to start putting on tefillin on a very special day, Yutas Kislev. And he informs his uncle, who in turn tells the Rebbe that this Schusterman boy has started putting on tefillin. Towards the end of the Farbrengen Yutas Kislev, which was Motzi Yutas Kislev, the Rebbe turns to the boy and he says he should say L'chaim. He says, Doi do Schusterman Zun. He started angeheben Handlegen Film, soll sagen L'chaim. Wo is er? So this what happened on Yutas Kislev. The following day, the Rebbe is writing to the father, Chof Kislev, and he says, I'm surprised that you don't mention anything about your son beginning to put on tefillin, which is all of, should we say, about 4 days earlier. Okay. So here you see the Rebbe was pleased, or he thanked him, or he acknowledged. Now, so then I put this out last week, and someone told me that there's a story with in the Gorari family, which a similar or perhaps a stronger story. So I contacted a colleague of mine, Reb Mendel Gorari, is in Antwerp. So he says, so first of all, he himself is born on the 10th of Av, and which would mean he starts putting on tefillin the 10th of Sivan. And his father asked the Rebbe said he can start putting on tefillin Erev Shavuos, which is also several days earlier. But this goes back a bit earlier. Reb Nosson Gerari, who was a shliach in Buffalo, and now he lives in Muncie, Mashpia, a very well-known person. At any rate, his birthday is on Purim. The year that he had turned Bar-Mitzvah, it was a leap year, and therefore he would have to start putting on tefillin Yud Dalet Shvat. And the Rebbe encouraged the father that the boy should start putting on tefillin on Yud Shvat because it's a very special day. So, as the story is, the Rebbe, after the fact, kind of blesses the child for the boy for starting early. There, the Rebbe kind of initiated that to start tefillin a couple of days early when there's an auspicious date, etc. So this is a roller album, I don't know. But if someone has a need for some reason to start putting on tefillin a few days earlier, well, we do have good backing for that. Let's move on. I see we're running out of time. Okay. Here's an interesting question. We're making a family event, and we're going to have it's not at home. It's going to be away from home, and there's little children. We'll bring them before Shabbos. I'm going to make kiddush, etc. The likelihood is that the little children will fall asleep at the event, and once they fall asleep, how do they get home? We're going to have to ask a goy to take the children home. Now, there is certainly a rule that you are allowed to ask a goy to do the needs for a child, to provide the needs for a child. That's legitimate. Question is, are you allowed to לכתחילה generate a situation which is then going to cause that you're going to have to call in a goy to, so are you allowed to do so, rely on this לכתחילה? So I didn't find this clearly, but I'm just drawing a parallel. There's a concept of graf shel rei, which means there's some things which are objectionable and they're muksa. And because they're muksa, well, you shouldn't be moving them. But because they are objectionable, so then koved habriyos overrides muksa, and therefore you are allowed to take away that objectionable presence because of koved habriyos. But then we have a halocha, and you can see it's from Simashin Ches, ein oisin graf shel rei lechatchila. You're not allowed to lechatchila generate a situation of, oh, I'm going to make here a pile of which is going to be objectionable, and then push aside this muksa because of koved habriyos. The point being that we don't generate a situation whereby you're going to have to override an Issa D'Rabbanan. And I think that's the same thing over here, that Amir al-Nochri is Issa D'Rabbanan. So lechatchila, I'm going to generate a situation, I'm going to override Issa D'Rabbanan, I think is not okay. I don't have any more proofs one way or the other. Let's move on. Okay, about going out, you go into center of town, there's going to be all these lights and spring, whatever, sparkles, whatever it may be. Is it okay to go and enjoy the displays which I've got to do with this, with chog, etc.? Again, I didn't see this clearly. We do have in Gemara talking about steering clear of a city of Avodah Zarah where they're being celebrated. Now, what you have here on the screen is from in Yerdea Shulchan Aruch saying that some say that nowadays the goyim are not genuine Ovdei Kachavim, and therefore all the restrictions which are mentioned in Gemara, Mishnah, about not trading with them, etc., on the day of their festival, don't apply nowadays because they're not real. That's not the real Avodah Zarah. And then I'm just skipping though. This in the Ramo, you can see the red writing. Therefore, he says, if you come into a town and you see that they're celebrating because it's their Chaga, so then you can rejoice with them. Mishum Eva, they shouldn't have a grudge against you. So you just play along with them. But then he says, Baal Nefesh, Yarchik Miras Moyachim Mohem. If you are a person who's more conscientious about your Yiddishkeit and your Shemayim, you'll keep your distance if you can avoid that they shouldn't get into a state of Eva. So it seems to be unethical. If that's the right word. There's a celebration of event. I'm not talking about buying those paper chains, whatever, and things to decorate your sukkah. That's another thing. There's no hektish for Avodah Zarah. There's no such thing as hektish because it's made for Avodah Zarah. Therefore, it's also. That's not true. But here it's actually there to celebrate this Chogah. Therefore, to go and enjoy it seems to be unethical. Here's another interesting thing. It says here, if someone sends a gift to a goy on the 8th day after Nittel, known as Nayor. In other words, if you count from 25th of December, then 8 days later is going to be the 1st of January. And the goyim have a simon that if they get a gift on that day, then it's going to be for them a good omen. So then he says, better to send the night before. And if not, you can send it on the same day. Okay, that's an interesting piece of information. Okay, someone is asking me about the bracha on, she has a juice maker, takes an orange and squeezes the orange and makes orange juice. And what is the bracha? And this even could be little pieces in it. Is the bracha shahakol or ha'etz? So this is from a sefer, a specialist on brachas, Shari HaBrocha, and he's saying that even if there's bits and pieces of the fruit or the vegetable for that matter, it's a juice, and therefore the bracha is shahakol. But then she asks another question: what happens if, as she squeezed a cup of orange juice, but then there's in this top of the squeezer there's bits and pieces, so she takes a bit of nibbles those pieces. Does she and mix her eights on that because it's still a piece of orange? Does she make a now separate bracha on the drink? So then this is also addressed over here. That if you're eating the fruit and then you are drinking the juice, there are those who say that you don't make a separate bracha. So again, it's the same setting. You've taken the fruit and you've squeezed out the juice, but you've also eaten a bit of the fruit. And therefore, there's a svara to say, and this given setting, that the juice is going to be bottled, so to speak, to the bit of fruit which you had, and therefore you would not say a separate bracha on the drink. Someone's now asking me during this past week, I'm middle of Sukkot Zimra, before Yishtabach, let's say. Sometimes it comes that you're a bit faster than the Chazan, etc. Can I use the time to say the Tilim? I say Tilim for my age, for the Rebbe's Tilim, for my children, whatever. Can I say those Tehillim in middle of Sukkot Zimra? Now, well, Sukkot Zimra is Tilim. What's the difference, this Tilim or that Tilim? Now, here's an interesting thing. You know, there's a difference between Nusach Ashkenaz and Nusach Sfard. And Nusach Ashkenaz, they say Baruch She'omar, and then Hoidu, etc. And on Shabbos, all the extra chapters which we say on Shabbos are all in Ashkenaz, all said after Baruch She'omar, almost all. Whereas in Nusach Sfard, we say all of those things before, Hoidu we say before, and we start with Baruch She'omar. So now, what's the reason why? The question is that the brachas of Baruch She'omar and Yishtabach were instituted by Anshe Knesset Havdolo. The recital of Hoidu, was that instituted by Anshe Knesset Havdolo, or was it introduced later? If it's introduced later, then it shouldn't be put in middle of Sukkot Zimra. It doesn't belong there. Therefore, it can be a kind of hefsek. So this is the reason why Nusach Ashkenaz and Nusach Sfard we don't say Hoidu after Baruch She'omar b'chashash hefsek. So and certainly that would be the case when it comes to just saying Tilim, random Tilim. They're not part of the. So according to Minhag Ashkenaz, it would be less of an objection. In Nusach Sfard, Minhag Sfard, it would be more an objection. I'm just going to read here from the Piskei Teshuvos. So we have here, besides the Besomim, which are set out, one shouldn't add others, even from Tilim, because these Tilim which are set out in Sukkot Zimra, they have been established from Rishonim Kemalochim, with there's deep secrets to that, and the Seder is a mechuven. Therefore, one shouldn't be tampering with the Seder. Then, what about between Yishtabach and Yotze? So, in other words, after you've finished Yishtabach, and then you haven't said Yotze Oyer, so you've finished the sequence of Sukkot Zimra, and then we have a new sequence called Birchas Krishma. Now, actually, there you are allowed to, written Shulchan Aruch, you could be mafsik l'dvar mitzvah. So, are you allowed to then, at that point, say some Tilim or do your shiur Tanya, whatever it may be, between after Yishtabach, before Yotzer, and let's say you're waiting for the Chazan. So, or let's say, would that be okay? So now we have, in for this again from the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, where he says, one who interrupts bein Yishtabach liyotzer oir. One should not be mafsik, and has a very strong lashon here. Hamafsik aveira hi beyodoi, v'choizer olov me'oicha hamilchama. As you know, when Yidden went to battle, it says whoever has a aveira, he would not go to the battle in case he would succumb chas v'sholem because of aveira shebeyodoi. So the one who interrupts between Yishtabach and Yotzer is considered an Aveira to the degree that it would disqualify him from going out Lamilcham. Very strong thing. And why is that? Because the Psukei Zimra are kind of the praise which is leading up to then Bechas Krishma and then Shmoyne Esrei. And so to interrupt there would not be okay. So again from Piskei Teshuvos, we're looking here that not to be mafsik between Yishtabach and Yotzer. And here's a little bit clearer, very, very nice niche here. Actually, I'll tell you, for years, I was concerned. It says in the Gemara Sot, if I'm not mistaken, that a person who is mafsik between Shel Yad and Shel Rosh is disqualified from Erche HaMilchama. So about 45 years ago or more, I asked the question, why does the Alter Rebbe say this one, who speaks between Yishtabach and Yotzer, he brings, that he's Choizer Olov Me'oicha Hamilchama, and why does he not bring the other one of mafsik between Shel Yad and Shel Rosh? And I never really got a satisfactory answer. But here we have now interesting insight. The Oicha HaMilchama, you can see here, the Oicha HaMilchama means that when you want to daven, and there's all those disruptions, they're disturbing you. They are the clippers, they are the Oicha HaMilchama. Now you've said Psukei Zimra, as you may know, that in Chassidus and Kabbalah, Mezimra means a lotion of pruning. So you're saying the Ashrei and Halocho, and you're cutting away the tendrils, whatever, of the clipper which is trying to disturb your davening. So that's the Milchama, Shas Shlosa Shas Krova. So if you're mafsik, now you just said Psukei Zimra to get rid of all those clippers to enable you to daven with kavanah. And now you're going to start disconnecting. So then that's the meaning of Choizer Olov Me'oicha Hamilchama, that you've kind of weakened your battle by talking at that point. And they in other words, you've stilled them, you've got them quiet, but then they're going to come back again and disrupt your kavanah and davening. So certainly he's saying he's saying about not being mafsik. But he says also, if you missed out, if you skipped something Psukei Zimra because you needed to catch up, and then it turns out you can have time, then you could say those missed out Tehillim. But to say Stam Tehillim or learning between Yishtabach and Yotzer, you should not do so orally, but to learn something, to open a sefer and to read at that point, that is okay. And then he says that the Bach brings from Rav Amram that actually you should go straight from Yishtabach straight into Yotzer Oir, mitzvah menamuvcher, not to be mafsik even b'shasika. All right, that's a bit better. Okay, right. Let's move on. Right. I saw that the Yishtabach, I think, is mentioned in the Gemara. Baruch Shem is not mentioned in the Gemara, but I saw that the Rif says it was already Takona of Antioch Knesset Agdola, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, let's move on. Number 9. Okay, we did that already. Number 10. I want to address this. A girl sent me a WhatsApp asking if a woman offered her a fruit which is from a graft of lemon and orange. So is she allowed to eat it? Then I said yes, but then I thought, just a second, are you in Eretz Yisrael? She's actually in Sem. I was right. She says she's in Eretz Yisrael, so I said I'll have to look it up. So again, so we have here in Shulchan Aruch and Yeridea, where it says Osu lekayim hamurkev kelayim. You're not allowed to maintain. If you have a tree which is a crossbreed, you're not allowed to keep it. The fruit is permitted, and even the one who did the aveira of grafting is allowed to have the fruit of that grafting. And this is to be different from Kili Hakerem. When the Torah says of destroying Kilayim, that's talking about with a vine with grain. But when it comes to other trees, not vine, then the product is mutter. To the degree that you're allowed to take a cutting from this tree and replant it. So, okay, there's no problem of eating the fruit. I want to just come back though, in case I've addressed this in the past, but people may not know. If you buy a tree from a garden center, the likelihood is a fruit tree. If you buy a fruit tree, likelihood is that the stock is from a different fruit, very like an apple tree, and the stock may be from a quince. And you'll see that at the bottom of the tree, it's wider. You can see how they've kind of taken a branch and stuck it into a stump of a different species. Now, you're not allowed to plant such a tree. It's an avera of murkuv, of planting a murkuv. And furthermore, if you have such a tree growing in your garden, keeping it there for 10 years, 20 years, and now you realize, oops, that tree in my garden is a graft, you have a chiyuv to uproot that tree. That's what he says. Also, the kaim hamurkiv kalayim. In the Pischei Shuvah, he brings the whole thing about Chassam Sofer, addresses that in his time in Hungary, it was very common. You'd buy a vineyard, and it was very common that they were murkiv. You'd buy a ready vineyard from Goyim, and what do you do about the kilayim which are there already? And he struggles with that, but certainly there's certainly a problem with that. Okay, let's move on. Someone asked me just before Shabbos about a menorah. Now, if you can see in the picture, is the menorah to be widthways? I'm not going to use the word perpendicular because I'm not sure which way that would mean. Is the menorah the width of the menorah? Again, is it? Look at the picture. That's all. Which way do you put the menorah? Is it lengthways in the width of the doorway, or is it widthways in the width of the doorway? And the answer is that we should put the menorah. Now, there is the idea the menorah should be within a tefach of the doorway. So it can be outside the doorway, and it should be within a tefach of the doorway. The preference, we're going to see in a moment, is to have it in the doorway mamash. But then again, if you put it lengthways in the doorway, so then some of the menorah is near the doorpost, and some of the lamps are going to be further away. If you put it mamish in the doorway, widthways in the doorway, then, of course, depending on how big your menorah is and how wide your doorway is, but there's more of a chance that the menorah that all the lamps will be within a tefach of the door frame, of the actual door, the wood of the doorpost, and that's the preference. I'm going to read here from the first one that we're going to have Rom, and that's from Tov Reish Ayin Vov, is it? Tov Reish Ayin Vov. So he brings here the first he talks about putting like a oyer keshpud, which means sticking out of the doorway, outside and sticking out. Then he brings Mate Moshe, brings from his Rebbe, from the Rashal, Rebbe Shlomo Luria, that you should put the menorah inside the door frame, like you put the mezuzah, preferably in the door frame. So that's where the menorah really belongs, within the door frame. And in that way, as I said, and that's in that way you have the advantage that the lamps are within a tefach. And here we have the Alter Rebbe's Siddur, yeah, that we don't have Yichas Chanukah in Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch. We have the Siddur, Aminig HaNochen, to Ladabik HaNeiros, to stick the like handles, or to hang the menorah in Be'uve HaMezuzah, B'chalal HaPesach, should be within the space of the doorway. In those times, it looks like they would hang the menorah, and in Amin Hogim it says that we put the menorah on a chair. So they would have like a little hook inside the doorway and hang the menorah on that. And you have like the menorahs with a back, so they would hang the menorah on a hook in the doorway. And nowadays we put the menorah on a little stool or something. Right. What else do we have here? Right, about having said Kaddish, started Kaddish in error. So someone sent me that in Shuvas of Reb Vayeishev in Shraga HaMeir, he was asked this question, and he says, if you just said Yiskadlu Yiskadash Shmei Rabo, then you can stop. Because that's a full statement, and you don't have to finish off. But if you are in middle of Kaddish, you should finish the Kaddish. And he says, "Ken nir nir's daiti." Now, b'hashgocha protis, during this past week, I came across something similar, and that's in Simatov Samaches. Now, it comes up about our minig on Erev Pesach not to say Mizmor L'Soda. There is a reason for that, but that's not a universal minig. Some do say Mizmor L'Soda in Erev Pesach also. So the Pri Megadim, who was a contemporary of the Alter Rebbe a little bit earlier, it was printed in the Alter Rebbe's lifetime. So he writes, if you started Mizmor L'Soda, you finish off the chapter. It's not like if you started Shmona Esra, and it's in the evening, in summer it's 7 o'clock, and you daven mincha, then you realize that at 2 o'clock you're already daven mincha, so you stop short in the middle of a Shemona Esra. So he says there you stop short because otherwise it's a bracha of atola. It wasn't an extra tefillah voluntary. You thought you hadn't daven mincha, then you realize you did, so you stop short. Right here it's a tilim. You're allowed to finish the tilim, and therefore he says, and then he says another point, that since other people have a minute to say a Mizmor L'Soda, so if you start it, so you finish off, you can follow to the minig of other people to finish off. So that's he's bringing in this idea that once you've started, you should finish when there's no down thing to it. Finally, finally about the pyramid menorah, pyramid-shaped menorah. So I got a lot of feedback on that. And number one, someone says to me that by the Chanukah live event and Tafshin Nun Aleph, so those who remember, it also showed the menorah being lit in Moscow. That's in 1991, 1990, whatever. And the menorah there was a menorah with like a pyramid shape. And the Rebbe encouraged this, whatever it was, applause, whatever it may be. So my response to that was, for those who remember, that there should be in 1990, there should be a menorah being lit in Barabim and being connected with the New York Live. It was such a chidush otzum that the fact that the menorah wasn't a straight menorah was a minor consideration. Not worth making a fuss about. That's one thing. Then someone sent that in the Nite Gavriel, he talks about this and he says it's kosher to use if it's not level also. He brings a quote, so Sefer Avnei Oshpe, and then that Sefer quotes from Marie Broiner, Yisrael Broiner, which is I think perhaps one of the very late Rishonim or early Achronim. At any rate, he writes that when you light a candle menorah, you should make each candle a bit higher than the next one. In other words, you should go Malim B'Kodesh. Each the candle a little bit higher. He doesn't say a pyramid. He's saying about making them dafka. The candles should be in succession to go up higher. Okay. Then my son-in-law in Chicago, he sent me a reference to there's a pirush from one of the Baalei HaTosfos, Vayeishev shiur, and he writes that when it says in the Torah that the menorah has got 3 branches on either side, so he says that all the branches were the same length, like branches of a tree. And so you got the main shaft is the tallest, and then you got 2 on either side, and behalachsen going up, and then the next 2 a bit lower, and they also go out the same length, and the third also a bit lower down, they go out the same length. That's what he says. Then he says, but the Gemara HaKoimet in Menachos says, Kol hakanim boim keneged begoiva shel menorah. So in Pshutei shel Mikra, he's learning that the menorah is actually not level at all. You got the branches of a tree coming up, but then he said, but the halacha in the way it's in Gemara is that they are all level. So just interesting stuff. And I wish you all a freiliche Chanukah and a freilichen Tomid. We should see Geula Shlema b'meir v'yameinu mamish.
Yasher koyach. Good luck.